YouTube, this is Steve from Average Joe's Fantasy Football. And yes, mock draft season is here for fantasy football, which means we are getting you guys ready for the NFL season and getting your drafts as pristine as possible to have a successful year. So with that said, make sure you guys are checking all the content. We are talking the second spot of a 12-team league and a full PPR edition. So of course, if there's any other type of formats, hit me up in the comments down below. Let's jump right into it. Like I mentioned, this is a 12-team full PPR mock draft. So if different formats, you might have some different ways of how this is going to go. And of course, I'd love to help you guys out. So let me know in the comments. But with that said, let's get this draft started and kind of see where players are starting to fall. Kind of give you some insight of where I like to go and hopefully some good tips to help you with this upcoming season. Now, with that said, in the second position, like I've mentioned with the 101, if you looked at that video, I like to go running back, right? For me, the running back position is such a very vital position to have in fantasy. If you can, try to grab at least 2 running backs within the first 3 rounds. That is the best possible chance of you having some success. Now, of course, there's other rules like handcuffs and sleepers and all kinds of stuff. But with that said, let's go to the running back position. And of course, with that, Jahmyr Gibbs is my option. Now, Bijan is a great option too. So depending on what your league mates are like, maybe they go Gibbs, then you go Bijan. If not, then go Gibbs at the second, and then kind of go from there. Now, you'll start to see a mixture of the wide receiver position kind of in the middle. Then again, running backs. Those are obviously the 2 positions that I would say, the first 2 to 3 rounds. Now, it is interesting when you'll see some rounds, maybe some of your league mates go tight end, maybe they go quarterback, whatever the case may be. Those positions, you could probably hold off a little bit longer. Now, looking at where I'm at right now, I can go obviously wide receiver like, Chris Olave. I can go AJ Brown, things like that. So I could probably try to grab one of those guys a little bit later. You got a running back like Chase Brown who's had some success. I do like him a lot. I'm not crazy about him in the second round. He's more like 3rd or 4th round. And then, of course, you got Josh Jacobs, and we're not sure what's going to happen with him with this upcoming season. But he is a great option, too, if he does actually have a full season, and then so on. Now, looking at the options here, I actually am going to go wide receiver here with AJ Brown. Only reason I say that is because I could get a second running back in the 3rd round, and I'm going to go Derrick Henry here, who is a great second option behind Jahmyr Gibbs. So I got a nice, I think, premier wide receiver 1 that has some interesting, we'll see how his season is now with the new team and everything like that. I do think him going to the Patriots with Drake May is actually an upgrade, so I love that one there. Now, with that, you're going to start to see quarterbacks, like your rushing quarterbacks, your Josh Allen, your Jaden Daniels, Lamar Jackson, things like that. Nothing necessarily wrong with it. They get a lot of points, but I would rather still go after a premier wide receiver or running back if I can to avoid, losing some of those points in those really, dire positions. Quarterback, you have a little bit better success later on in rounds. That is my opinion. It's a strategy I've been doing for years, and it has been very successful. Now, looking at this, I've got my 2 running backs. I got wide receiver, and now I've got to fill out the rest. You could go tight end like you see Loveland. You see Bowers and McBride. Those guys are going to go pretty early. You got Tyler Warren. Here's a nice little option. But I'd rather still go wide receiver or running back. Now, I'm going to go Devonta Smith here. Again, number 1 receiver now for Jalen Hurts. Good option there. And I like where he's at. And I think he has really good rapport with Jalen Hurts. Even though I'm not crazy about Jalen Hurts as the quarterback, I think he has some limitations. But him and Devonta have just been amazing, so I'm not going to miss out on that opportunity. Now, you can go running back again here. I still think I could get another running back a little bit later that I like as my depth piece. I'm going to try to fill out my wide receivers or, possibly my flex positions. And looking at the options here at the wide receiver position, you got Ibuka. I think he is still going to be a really solid wide receiver 2/3. Terry McLaurin, obviously with a healthy Jaden Daniels, is nothing but a great thing to see. And then, of course, you can go, maybe DJ Moore. New quarterback, for him with Josh Allen. I'm going to go with a little bit of a safer route with Terry McLaurin just because there's a little bit of a better floor with him than maybe the other options because there's so uncertainty, right? Ibuka shined, but then he kind of faltered. We'll see how that plays out. Now you can start to consider maybe tight end position, maybe the quarterback position, depending on who is available. At the 7th 8th, ninth, those are kind of where I like to go with those players. But again, I want to see what's available. Looking at the options here, I really liked Kyle Pitts, Tucker Kraft as far as an option. I love the pick of Rome Odunze. I think Odunze is a really good pick here. And then again, feel really good about my flex. I do like possibly getting a running back if you can in this area. A couple running backs did go. I wanted to possibly grab Swift, Judkins. Those are a couple of good options, but unfortunately they did go a little bit earlier than I'd like. So I have to kind of pivot a little bit. With that, I'm actually going to go Tucker Kraft. I'm hoping he obviously ends up becoming the form that he was before his injury, because Tucker Kraft was a top 5 tight end easily. And so getting him here at a later position, I feel really good about. Now I got to start considering the quarterback position, because I do have to obviously fill my main roster, and everything else is going to be depth pieces, right? Bye week fillers or matchup thing, situations. So you want to start literally considering the quarterback position. Now, the quarterback I try to aim for here is Dak Prescott, because he usually is very valuable. Clearly, you see him taken a little bit earlier than that. So kind of lost out on that one. Not a horrible thing. You could risk the fact that Patrick Mahomes' injury, he may miss a couple weeks in the beginning of the season, and you get him later on, or you may have a quarterback that ends up showing up. We're kind of curious and see how that plays out. We'll see how mini camp and training camp and all that fun stuff goes on during the preseason and offseason. But with that said, I'm going to hold off on quarterback just because I'm not going to go after Trevor Lawrence. Patrick Mahomes, I'd love to get possibly a little bit later if he does fall a little bit further. So I got to start filling out some of my roster, right? I can get a backup tight end, maybe another receiver, maybe a running back. I'd like to get a running back here, and sometimes you have to reach a little bit. And looking at the options you've got here, you got Kenny Gainwell with the new roster. J.K. Dobbins done pretty good. Jacory Krosky Merritt. Some really good options here. I'm actually going to get Jadarian Price. He ends up probably starting right now for Seattle. We'll see how he plays out together with Charbonnet, because obviously it's a factor you got to deal with. And then I'll probably grab one more tight end. I'm not always the second tight end type of person. I typically will try to grab another, but I'm actually going to go and grab George Kittle, because again, you're having a tight end who is a top 8, if not 5 in most cases, a lot later because of injuries. Yeah, I'm going to go grab him. Now, again, like I mentioned, you're going to see a lot of quarterbacks. Now, typically, you won't see 2 quarterbacks drafted unless maybe really, really late in leagues, if it's a 2 quarterback or not a super flex league, right? You want to try to see really only rostering one quarterback for your roster, not necessarily to have the others. So I do have 3 spots to fill plus my quarterback. And looking at the quarterback position, I've got to start thinking I've got to fill him. So I'm going to go to Jordan Love here. Not the craziest spot, but again, still could potentially be a top 10 fantasy quarterback. Don't hate the move there. And then when you're looking at this, the rest of this roster, I do have some really good depth pieces. I'd like to get another running back, so I'll get Jacory Krosky Merritt. So I got 4 running backs. Feel really good about that with possible injuries or bye weeks or anything like that. So you want to make sure you have some depth there. Because a lot of times when I draft, at least in my ways of doing it, I don't necessarily go off of bye week. I've got to get the best players available. Sometimes the bye weeks fall unfortunate. Sometimes they're perfect for you. So you do have to consider them, but I wouldn't go out of my way to avoid them if possible. So now I got 2 more flex players, and of course the tight end or the kicker and the defense. Now looking at the options here, I really like Josh Downs as a really good option, as a nice little depth piece. I think him and Daniel Jones have done pretty good. Again, they have Alec Pierce. Michael Pittman's moved on, so Josh Downs now becomes a little bit more prominent in that offense, which is awesome. And then you can go running back like Jordan Mason, right? Another option here. I'm actually going to go Tyjae Spears. Obviously, you still have Tony Pollard to deal with and things like that, but I like Tyjae Spears as a nice little, again, depth piece, right? We're just considering depth. Now I got to get my kicker and defense. In this one, you can go either way when it comes to the defense or kicker as far as where they fall. One of the things, like I mentioned, if you watch any of my other videos, the kicking in Sleeper is kind of weird. They don't necessarily put the players that are active. They kind of put players that are, I don't know how they rank them. It's really weird. You could even say that about the defense sometimes. But when you look at the options here and you look at the defenses, you got defenses like the Texans, who are really good, Patriots, who are really good. So those type of teams are probably who I'd like to go after. And then as far as kicker, if I can, I'm absolutely going to go after Aubrey. And like I mentioned with Sleeper, it's a little weird that I have to kind of type these guys in just because, again, I shouldn't have to, but I do as far as getting my kickers, right? It's something that they're kind of weird at. So again, Aubrey's one of the best kickers you want to get in fantasy. So let's go and grab him for this roster. So let's talk about how this draft went and see how things go, okay? All right, so that's how my second spot of a 12-team league goes, right? And again, this is going to change often. I recommend doing mock drafts as often as you can. You kind of get familiar with where players are falling, maybe they're getting picked up a lot earlier than you thought. It kind of gives you some idea. Now, I recommend usually trying to do mock drafts with other people. It gives you a little bit better understanding of where the community feels players are at. Sometimes these mock drafts with CPUs are a little bit different, but I feel really good about that roster. I like the running backs that I had, I like the receivers I had. Not sold completely on the quarterback, but again, quarterback is something you may have to go a little bit early if you want. Don't be afraid to kind of grab a player a round or two early if that's the guy you really want on your roster, you feel really good about. But again, I love the players that are there. Continue to make sure you guys are watching these videos. I'm going to go through all the way to the 12th position. And of course, there's different formats. Let me know. I'd love to do some other ones. Maybe a 10-team league. Maybe it's a super flex. Different stuff to help you guys out. So make sure you guys are subscribed to that channel. Hit that like button because it's greatly appreciated. I'll see you guys next time.